Why is medieval art so bad? Why is medieval art so weird? Why is medieval art so creepy? Why is medieval art so ugly? Why is medieval art so strange? Why is medieval art so funny? Why is medieval art so bad? Reddit. Why is medieval art
drawings
bad?
look very badly drawn in
Why is
comparison
art
to
from the Middle
Renaissance
Ages
art?
so bad?
Why is medieval art so ugly?
Why are medieval paintings so creepy?
Why does medieval art seem to be so
Why are
childish
medieval
and
paintings
unskilled?
so
Why did art
crappy?
seem to devolve
Why was some
from the
medieval
Roman
art
Empire
so
to
badly
medieval
drawn?
art?
I'm no painter or
People
drawer
must
myself, but I
spend
think
all
it's
their
fairly
time
to
writing
say
Middle Age
paintings seem so
Why did everyone
unrealistic.
suck at art in the Middle
It's
Ages?
weird
Is it
because there
because
are
they were
examples
drawing
of absolutely
exterior
gorgeous
Middle
art
Ages?
around the time,
medieval art
and
is
following
very
centuries.
I understand
Some of it is
materials
truly
in the Middle
atrocious.
Ages.
There's a big
Luster,
contrast
both
in
in
terms
quality,
of drawing utensils
compared to the
canvas
previous
paper,
two,
and paintings from the
I
Middle
know
Ages.
absolutely.
So, why does medieval art look like that? Before I try to answer that, I want to tell you a story often told about the origins of medieval art. In ancient Greece and Rome, there was prosperity in artwork. There was intense detail and study of anatomy. Beautiful masterpieces were made that still astound us to this very day. Masterpieces like the statue of Augustus or the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. But when the Roman Empire fell, everything changed. Skills and knowledge that had been built up over hundreds of years had been lost, and as a result, artwork suffered. Art would decline in quality and stagnate for 1,000 years until Roman sculpture was rediscovered after the medieval era, which would give way to the Renaissance. Now, while this narrative is compelling, it is oversimplifying a lot of history, and it is pretty much just incorrect. This story has led many people to believe that the reason why medieval artwork looks the way that it is because medieval artists couldn't replicate the same methods that the Romans used. But this is not true at all. When people ask why medieval art looks bad or unskilled, they usually think of a comparison along the lines of this. A medieval manuscript compared to some sort of ancient relief, sculpture, or mosaic. There is a huge problem with this comparison though. The problem being that comparing the average medieval manuscript to an ancient masterwork sculpture is a completely unfair comparison. It's like comparing a single page of a modern-day picture book to a 10-foot Renaissance painting, and then coming to the conclusion that all modern art is bad and that all Renaissance art is good. It just simply makes no sense at all. They have completely different art styles, they have different mediums, they have completely different artistic intent, and completely different sizes. For instance, most medieval manuscript art is tiny, usually only a few centimeters or millimeters. For example, the manuscript that you see here has a page size of 4.6 inches by 3.3 inches. To give you a perspective, this is around the same size of the average outlet cover. And keep in mind, this is only referring to the page size. It is not referring to the actual illustration itself, which is far smaller. And there is even manuscripts that are smaller than this one. The Hours of Jean Devreux has pages that are only 3 by 6 inches by 2 by 4 inches. And even then, it still contains very, very intricate and detailed illustrations. Now compare that with these ancient sculptures, which are usually around the size or even bigger than the average person. The statue of Augustus stands at around 7 feet tall. This is because they have completely different artistic intent. Ancient sculptures like the ones that I have shown were meant to be placed in public places for everyone to see, and were often meant to make a statement about who's in power or display the triumphs of the state. Now compare that to medieval manuscripts, which were very highly specific. The art was almost always made to pertain to the writings of the book. This is quite important because there was many different types of medieval manuscripts. There was math manuscripts, there was science manuscripts, there was even sheet music. So since manuscripts were often so highly specific, they often put less care into the beauty of the art itself. So now that we understand that these two types of artwork are incomparable, let's move on to something that is very important in this discussion. Usually, people don't associate skill with medieval artwork. The stereotype is that medieval artwork is very childish and unskilled. This isn't true at all, though. There was good and bad artwork in both medieval times and in ancient times. You might not believe me, but that's probably because you haven't been shown good medieval art. For example, this manuscript I wouldn't say is a masterpiece even for medieval art. In fact, I would say that this manuscript is a horrible representative of medieval artistic talent, and most medieval art that is shown to people isn't spectacular. It's a real shame because you aren't shown the amazing masterpieces of medieval art, such as Giotto or Giovanni Pisano, or even the sculptures of the cathedrals such as Reims. Instead, you are shown a random obscure manuscript and told, "Yup, that's medieval art." Essentially, you are shown some of the worst medieval art and are told that it is the best medieval art. So when you compare the two, obviously medieval artists are going to seem less skilled than their Roman counterparts. But when you actually show good medieval artwork, all of a sudden, both sides of the comparison are equally matched. This shows that medieval artwork doesn't look the way that it does because medieval artists were unskilled or dumb. They were able to replicate and achieve the same level of artistic mastery that the Romans did. Then why, you might ask, does medieval art not look like Roman art then? Well, the answer to that question simply boils down to art style is something that is very important to medieval artwork. Art style is the reason why medieval artwork looks different than ancient artwork and from later on Renaissance artwork. For the most part, it's the reason why medieval art looks the way that it is. And to prove this, I'm going to show you a few examples. In the manuscript known as the Morgan Bible, you see a battle that is supposed to be in front of some city gates. But the artists purposely represent this with just a small tower with a gate. This tower is very proportionally out of scale with the rest of the figures, and the background is obviously more decorative than realistic. My point here is that the artists could have made this more realistic. After all, in the Morgan Bible, you see many things such as horses, wagons, and many different items that are portrayed more realistically, but the artist purposely chose to portray these things the way that they are. This is all because of the art style which they were working in. You can even see the same stylistic elements in other manuscripts during this time. This page from the Codex Manesse shows the same small tower and decorative background as the Morgan Bible. These two manuscripts and many different manuscripts share these same stylistic elements. Some of the sketchbooks that these artists were using have survived, and it shows that they purposely and deliberately practiced these stylistic features. I mean, just look at the specific sketchbook. You can see extremely realistic and detailed drawings of architecture, but when you see his drawings of figures, he doesn't include any of that realism. Instead, the artist follows the same stylistic standards of his time, which shows that the look of medieval artwork comes from its style. Then why does some medieval art look so much different than other medieval art? Well, the Middle Ages lasted more than 1,000 years, and during that time there was many different artistic styles and trends. Styles like Byzantine, Carolingian, Ottonian, Romanesque, Gothic, and many more. So now that we understand that the look of medieval artwork comes from its style, and not the skill of the artists themselves, we should probably know the real story of how these medieval styles came to be. Just as before, our story starts in the Roman Empire. Great artwork was being created in a realistic and naturalistic style, but unlike the story told before, the shift away from realism didn't start in the Middle Ages. It started in Rome itself. During the late Roman Empire, there was a notable artistic shift away from realism. You can actually see this trend away from realism when you compare art from the time of Trajan to that of Emperor Constantine. In Trajan's column, you see far more realism in the figures. The drapery flows more realistically, they have more realistic movement, while in the relief from the Ark of Constantine, you see far less realism and more stiffness in the figures. Even though the Roman Empire hasn't fallen, there is clearly a trend shifting away from realism over time. But even then, it was not an artistic decline, it was rather a deliberate stylistic trend away from realism. The Roman Empire was so saturated with heavily realistic artwork that they purposely strayed away from it in order to create something new and unique. So when the Roman Empire fell, the medieval artists only continued this trend towards symbolism, and once they started to get tired of symbolism, they transitioned back into more realistic artwork, which would then lead into the Renaissance. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a thing or two. I will say that I oversimplified a bit for this video, mostly because I'm not really used to editing, but I will still probably expand on this in future videos. But once again, thanks for watching, and please comment if you have any thoughts to share. I would really appreciate that.